I want now to think about the first line of the Lord's Prayer, Our Father in Heaven. I said at the end of the last video that Eric Alexander's quote is absolutely right. The Lord's Prayer is searching and transforming. And it's absolutely true of the first line of the Lord's Prayer. It's searching. Right at the beginning of this prayer, Jesus wants to take an X-ray, as it were, to us, to show what's inside. He wants to check what our spiritual foundations are. In asking us to pray our Father in Heaven, he's presupposing two relationships. A relationship with others based on the relationship which is vertical to the Father. He's asking basically, are we part of God's family, the church? Well, you remember what John says at the beginning of his Gospel. To all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become the children of God, speaking of Jesus. So you see, this is searching. Not everyone can pray, and no one can do it naturally. Jesus is saying to pray you must have this depth of relationship, having God as your Father. Now this is no trick of Jesus. He's not trying to hold something out to us that is impossible. In an earlier video I explained that we can come and know God as our Father because Jesus, the eternal Son, came to us first. He came and entered into our nature and our predicament. And at the cross, he who had always prayed my Father was only able to pray my God. He allowed it to be possible for us to exchange our broken relationship with God so that we might be embraced in his, as he bore for us the silence and judgment from God that we deserve. But Jesus is testing us. He is searching us out to say, do you have that relationship? And do you? Can you say that you have come to God through Jesus and that in him you have this relationship? You see, sometimes people like to talk about praying as if it's just an exercise, just something that we have a go at. But it's not like meditation or any of these other things. It's something that is a deep reality expressed. To do it, we need to know God as our Father. So the Lord's Prayer is searching, and this line is searching, but it's also transforming. Because if you do know God as your Father through Jesus, this is a reality that changes all of our praying and all of our lives. It is a wonderful, deep intimacy, like that of a child and parent. I was reading one author talking about this line of the Lord's Prayer, who was explaining something that happened to him every day at 4 o'clock that at first confused him. His teenage son would come in from school and come into where his dad was sitting and just flop down on the sofa. The father tried to engage the son with conversation and found he didn't really get anywhere. And he was really trying to figure out why on earth every day his son would do this. But really it was, he realised, that he just wanted to be with his dad. He just wanted to know his presence. And that's what Jesus is teaching us here. Prayer is not first a transaction. It's not first a duty. It is coming to be with God, our Father. It's to be in enjoyment of that relationship that we have. Like any earthly father, to know God as our Father is to be in a relationship where we are known and loved, nurtured and embraced, where we are understood, And yet it's more, because God knows us better than we even know ourselves. He has seen every episode of our lives. He knows our fears and anxieties and our shortcomings and our frustrations. And yet, as Father wants to lead us through all of these things for His glory and our good, even though at times He will take us through trials and troubles along the way. God is a Father who loves us, and we're encouraged to come to Him like this. Isn't it interesting that this is how Jesus begins the Lord's Prayer? I suppose He could have begun it, our King or our Creator, but instead He wants us to begin right at the outset, acknowledging God as a good Father who loves us and wants to lead us. Let me just share with you an experience of this that I had myself. A few years ago, Susan and I were on holiday in Seville, and there's a wonderful cathedral in that city. Well, it was hot, and I was tired from walking and a bit frustrated with life. Susan had gone off to go walk up the tower, and I just sat down for a moment or two, away from the crowds, in the corner on a bench. Well, I'm sure I was experiencing what you have often felt. One of those days where you're just troubled inside and there are choppy waters. I was frustrated, tired, annoyed at myself, acknowledging my sinfulness. And I took out my Bible reading for the day. It was John chapter 1. And as I read that and thought about it, I then turned to pray to God. And I poured out all of my frustrations and tiredness and weariness and hurt and struggle to Him. And at the same time I was able to think on what I'd read in that passage, which showed me that Jesus, this eternal Son who is the Word, the one through whom the world was made, willingly came down here to this earth to be rejected and hated, that I might be loved and be accepted as a child of God. Well, I had this beautiful moment where I can only describe it as being held, loved, embraced. I knew that God was my Father and that He loved me, and that He had forgiven me my sins, that He was wanting me to change and was going to help me that day and every day. It was that depth and beauty and intimacy that we all long for. Interestingly though, just as I finished that, I got up and went to see what all the crowds were looking at. And it was this most magnificent altar, 30 feet high, covered in gold, where everyone was going to light candles that they might in some way interact or connect with God. The odd thing was though that really there was a great grate in front of it. It was closed off. And the impression you got standing from afar looking at these people was that they wanted to connect with God, but God seemed so far away, so disinterested. And yet that's not what Jesus teaches here. And that's not the experience I was sharing with you. You see, Jesus here teaches us that we may know God as our Father, the one who knows and loves and cares for us. It was something I knew on that bench, and something you can know now if you would turn to God and seek Him. I want to put up a few aspects of God's fatherly care now on a slide. Maybe use these to help you pray to Him today.